Pleasure Cube. I look out over the balcony at the gloomy metropolis below, the fumes from my cigarette mixing with the city's thick smog. I was in apartment 842B1 in Megatower Delta, one of the largest housing complexes on the East Coast. I'd been moved here after the outbreak of the Sixth Conglomerate War of 2103, when a plasma shell cooked out the left side of my government-appointed domicile. And now, after believing that things couldn't get any worse, they decided to ship me somewhere infinitely more unlivable. Being housed in the city is one thing, but these towers are hellscapes. Crime of the highest depravity is rampant, and corruption among authorities is near total. There's just too many people to control. Chaos was always inevitable in a slum like this. I toss the electric cherry brand smoke over the balcony, and it disappears into the cloud below mere inches from my face, its pinkish red tip trailing before fading out of sight. I take one last look at the skyline, beaming at me through the pollution, and I can't help but feel sick to my stomach. All this, and yet we still live like savages? I turn the light off as I wave my hand over the door control, and I hear various scuttling noises envelope my one-room apartment as I leave, the maglocks securing my meager living arrangement behind me being their reassurance of my departure. Where those bugs come from, I have no idea. There's not exactly much furniture to hide under. Must be the cracks in the walls. I crouch down and peek around the corner into the large concrete hallway, dimly lit by overhead lights, most of which have been smashed by vandals. The elevator is near the end in the glow of a smoldering dumpster fire. The coast seems clear. I can hear screaming coming from one of the many graffiti-covered apartments littering the chasm-like hallway, blaring hard techno coming from another, and something that sounds like power tools from another. Which was anyone's guess. Maybe they were all coming from the same room. The echo made it difficult to tell. I listened through the mess of noise for anything that sounds like it might be an immediate threat. Scavengers make their nests in burnouts and other condemned places around the tower in small gangs. Then they jump the residents when they have to leave the relative safety of their homes for their depressing assigned job, shoveling scop or supervising droids in the factories. Scavs were rife on my floor. I hear footsteps running up behind me, and I sprint the last stretch to the elevator. I smash the door release button, and my body collapses to the grubby metal plating beneath as I state the voice command for my specified floor. Thankfully, the AI understands me first time for once, and the steel doors slowly close, the heavy thuds coming to a stop, as whoever it was giving chase realizes they weren't going to get me today. The large box begins its descent to the ground floor, and I thank Zombie Jesus that I made it this time. This was a close call, but I've had closer. One time, some psycho freak bit into my ankle with chrome chompers, and I was laid up for a month. I almost starved to death. I back myself up into a corner, and I clutched the small homemade knife in my pocket as I watched the numbers on the floor dial tick down. Most of the time, the elevators are safe due to the biosensors, but people still get robbed in them, and worse every day. Nobody else uses the elevator, and I enter into the megatower foyer alone. Security drones buzz above my head, and their scanners make my midsection feel hot as they check me out. The ground floor is the safest part of any megatower. Everywhere else in the building seems to be fair game for scum looking to take advantage these days. The rain hits me hard in the face, as I step outside and the neon from the street makes my eyes twitch, bedazzling compared to the depressing interior lighting of the towering tomb I call home. I'm about to arrive at the geomine, where I'll spend the next 14 hours jacked into a bot control extracting ore and other valuable materials from the Earth's seabed, when I notice a new light board I've never seen before. It's an ad for the Pleasure Cube program. Apparently, Geis Corp had developed a new power conversion technology the previous year that harnesses the human mind, and they were looking for volunteers to test on. The idea being that they hook you into their system, you become their battery, and in return, you get to experience bliss forever, or so the marketing said. I take a deep breath and scan my wrist dock, adding the contact info into my database. Tears begin to roll down my face for the first time in years, and they mingle with the heavy rain as I finally accept the fact that I can't keep living like this. I eventually make it home after another stressful trek through the halls of Mega Tower Delta, narrowly managing to sneak past some rabid junkheads on the hunt for fresh parts to pawn off. As soon as the doors close behind me, I access my call service and initiate contact with the GIS Corp contact ID from the light board. An automated response picks up, and in a friendly, sing-songy tone of voice states, "Thank you for contacting the GIS Corp Department of Research. Your doing so has been recorded as proof of your agreement to the terms of the Pleasure Cube program. A GIS Corp mobile unit is on their way to escort you to your final destination. Your new life starts now." A knot hits my stomach as I realize the finality of my decision. I know that everything is about to change forever, and a deep sense of dread overcomes me as I prepare to say goodbye to the hovel the powers that be dare to call suitable mass accommodation. I open the cupboard under the sink that doesn't work, and I grab the tiny bottle of spirits I've been keeping for a moment like this. I crack it, and I swig it down in one mouthful. It's only about 12%, but it's all I can afford. Just as the fiery liquid hits my stomach, a loud knock at the door jolts me, and I feel a warmth, like when the bots scan me for contraband. I release the maglocks, and two men in long black coats walk over, take me by the arms, and lead me to the elevator. No words are exchanged. We walk out into the street, and I feel a prick at the base of my spine. I awake, and I'm already restrained in what I assume is the fabled pleasure cube. I was strapped into a table-like platform, which took up most of the cold 10-square-foot metallic room. Illuminated by bright, flickering lights, not dissimilar to that of the mega towers. The same woman's voice from the lightboard contact begins to speak through my earware. "Welcome to the Pleasure Cube program. Geis Corp is delighted to have you. We're sure you can't wait to move on to the greener pastures we are providing, so we promise to keep this introduction brief. You are mandated to stay on your designated pleasure platform, with all required technical implantation active for the entirety of your allotted 23.5-hour workday. Failure to comply will result in termination. On your break, we advise that you practice relevant stretching and exercise to avoid preventable muscle decay. Any attempt to leave your pleasure cube without proper authorization from staff will result in termination. Immediately before and after your break, staff will implant and remove appropriate Geis Corp technology to facilitate the entering and exiting of bliss state. Any attempts to interact with staff during this time will result in termination. This announcement has legally been recorded as your final required acceptance of the terms of the Pleasure Cube program and of the JIS Corp Testing Treaty of 2048. All of your previously given rights under the Eastern Coalition have now been revoked. I tense up as the door to the small chamber slides open, and two doctors in white scrubs begin preparing equipment. I don't want to risk breaching the terms I just agreed to, so I don't yell out in pain when one of them jams a tube in my urethra, nor when the other presents another tube with a drill-like device on the end and uses it to burrow into my stomach. Finally, 2 electrodes are fastened to my temples, and with a flash I'm transported to a world of pure color like nothing I've ever seen. I can't move. I don't even seem to have a body anymore, but I don't need one. And just as I'm rolling in a crescendo of ecstasy, a bright streak of white covers my vision, and I scream my lungs out in terror. My senses come back to me as a single masked orderly makes his way over to my platform. Without much care, he yanks out my nutrition tube, and with slightly less roughness, he removes my catheter. Then, as my wrist and ankle restraints are removed, I try to stand up and immediately fall to the ground. It takes me a while to get on my feet, and I try my hardest to perform the recommended exercises, but I struggle not to collapse back to the floor. And then, just as I'm beginning to get my footing, the guard returns and forcefully places me back on the chilly metallic slab, tightly fastening my restraints. We make eye contact for a few seconds, and I can tell that he is also dead inside, like myself and many others I've known and lost. I wonder why he doesn't also join the program. The tubes are painfully reinserted, and I'm back in heaven. It feels so good, and yet so incredibly brief, like a dream. I return to consciousness once again, and the immediate ache in my bones and muscles is debilitating. I whimper as the men in white fiddle with my extensions, and I flop onto the pristine white floor as the door closes behind them. This time I never even make it past a crawl. I struggle as best I can to kick my legs and flail my arms, anything to keep them from withering away, but I'm too weak. The men return, and it takes everything in me not to beg for more time to try and recuperate. I'm jacked in, and all feels right, but only for a moment. This time my eyes open, and I feel nothing, not even a tingle. A different man is accompanying the staff, distinguished looking, clearly a superior of some sort. He stares me up and down and prods at my limbs with a pen, before declaring me ready for advanced siphoning, and the 2 underlings remove the piss tube from my now raw and lightly bleeding urethra, along with my nutrition port. Another goon wheels in a gurney, and I'm carelessly plopped onto it with little concern for my well-being. An increasingly painful, numb sensation is starting to overtake my body, and before I could let out any sort of plea for help, I was brought into a large hall, stretching as far as I could see, filled with big red pods. An endless sea of bodies. The last thing I feel before they entomb me and hook me up for the final time is a wave of relief. I'm glad I never have to wake up again. I was the first human to die. Sands of time seems to move much faster once infinite sands become finite. There are no do-overs, no button to press restart. You cannot reflip the hourglass or fill it with more sand. We continue to live on as the decades, years, months, weeks, days, hours, and seconds ticks away from the very hands of death. Death. The oldest, strongest emotions are not lust, hatred, love, happiness, but rather fear. There are no languages or experiences to describe such immense abysms of greatest, unimaginable unknowns hidden within every molecule of life. Nothing more monstrous than the infinite potential of horrors that exist beyond the veils of reality. Nothing is more potent than the fear of the unknown, death. Even if I lay dying on the soft grounds, soaked with blood, every passing moment became less real. The world became more duller. It felt as if the sun hid behind the cloud, plunging the lands into a penumbral void. It felt cold, dark, vast emptiness of nothingness. I felt scared, but I also felt tired. It is unfortunate that I won't be able to hear your thoughts and answers. Maybe in the distant future I will. But if you're going to indulge yourself further into my writing, then I guess it would be appropriate to tell you a story about my life. I had a fairly small family. My parents, my brother, my grandfather, and well, to say the least, he is quite interesting. Respectfully. It started when my grandfather mourned about his children. They were tempted by the inevitable fate of curiosity and naiveness. His children no longer resembled him. Their common themes diverged into their own, deviated from their creator. Stricken with grief, my grandfather let my parents leave his nest. It was around the time they had us, me and my brother. My father became a hunter. My mother was the chef of the family. My brother was a farmer. Meanwhile, I took care of the sheep. Every once in a while, Grandfather would come by to visit us. He enjoyed the savory aromas that lingered throughout our house. It reminded him about his stories he told us when we were little. Stories such as the paradise, flowers, juicy fruits that grew from its stems, herbs, and plants that flourished and rarely withered. There were also rivers, sustaining lives of the animals that flew, swam, and to those that roamed. So my family would pick the best sheep from the herd, lay it upon the stone table, and watch the fire licks its wool. Sometimes bits of my brother's crops burned alongside it, creating a musky scent of meats, fruits, and vegetables. At most, my grandfather loved the smell of burnt meat. After many suns passed and after many visits, my brother asked me if I could help harvest some of the crops, prepare the meals for dinner, and save some in case grandfather came by. We spent the majority of our days collecting crops, separating the bad ones into a pile and the good ones into the baskets. As time went on, his face contorted, his lips stretched into a thin, grimace smile. To many people, they might not find that detail odd. But to those who knew him well, he rarely smiled. Usually he smiles whenever he was alone on the farm field, talking to his crops as if it was his own children. However, at that moment my brother was collecting stones. It was roughly the size of tennis balls. Despite how strange my brother was, I shrugged it off, assuming he was collecting stones for the fire pit. It was normal until my brother asked me a question, which forever echoes in my head, or at least from the blood trickling from my temple. "What would you do if you knew how much time you had left?" my brother whispered. Suddenly a sharp ring pierced my eardrum. Waves of warmth coursed through my veins, pumping blood into my head. Every branch of my nerves screamed in pain from the welt on my head. Swaying, I swore I was standing, but the world felt like it was spinning around me in messy, confusing blurs of colors. My body slumped across the ground. It felt still, stable, motionless. My eyes were not only staring at the sky above, but at the face of my brother, looming over me, just an inch away from my face. The sun made his silhouette sharper, casting a dark shadow underneath his face, except for his psychotic grin, ear to ear, and his white, bulgent eyes. Smiling wildly, his cracked lips splitting apart, he was shaking, excited to share his answer. Simply nothing. Nothing. Because we will not know. We will all die regardless. But they won't know nothing about this. Staring straight into his eyes, the oldest, strongest emotion welled up inside me. Fear. Those eyes. These are not the eyes of brotherly care and love. That was long gone. Instead, those eyes are filled with hatred, jealousy, and resentment, a desire to kill. Those eyes, I was staring into the eyes of the murderer. It wasn't long until I groggily blinked my eyes to an empty field. My brother was no longer there, nor were his fields or our houses nearby. The world faded away, like old memories. Like a Polaroid left out in the sun, hazy images of my extinguished life. A mirror side of the reality of what once was, filled with life, but instead filled with bleak and despair. Where the trees and mountain once stood to reach out for the sun. Where the thick forests protected the exhausted animals from the sun. Where everything that was in place seemingly disappeared from the faces of the earth. I walked for eternity, never ending, never hungry or thirsty or weary. But no matter how far I walked, I was trapped within this voidless, barren land. I felt lonely, scared, and lost. However, I sometimes found people wandering, more lost than I was. As the sightings became more common and frequent, I greeted every soul and welcomed them. I gave them a home, back to the place some people might consider heaven. However, there were moments when everything felt familiar. It felt like the memory being recovered from anesthesia. My memories somewhat lingered there, reminding me that I was once human, not dead, but not alive either. Then it brought me back to this question. What would you do if you knew how much time you had left? Now, while I can't read your thoughts or predict what you are wondering now, but while you spent your time reading my little story, I spent my lifetime gathering the lost souls. And like you, I had been listening. Not just my stories, but listening to the stories about other people. As time went on, stories always changed their narration. There were stories where humanity not only had passed away physically, but died long ago, a little while after they associated being alive to being undead. Not a literal death, but an empty husk that walks and breathes on the land of the living. Within our numbered days, it was not much, and sometimes it was not great either. Overall, time, we don't have enough. Or to look from a different perspective, we have exactly as much time as we need. But it is not guaranteed that we will use it correctly. Ironically, the sand itself is similar to time. The tighter we hold on to it, the faster it slips through our fingers, never to be seen again. Like the sands, we will never know what too late is, as we will not know. But it will become too late if we keep everything off until tomorrow. It is never too late to do something worthwhile. Even when I am dead, I do miss the memories of holding hands, embracing the hugs, and saying, I love you. The feeling whenever I see my parents, play with my brother, and listen to my grandfather's stories about paradise. Moments given to moments past as treasures. To go through ups and downs, but still love each other unconditionally. I miss the feeling of the sun dancing onto my skin before it decayed into nothing but flakes and bones. To savor the taste of the freshly cooked meat, the freshness of the fruits and vegetables, the fragrant smell of the foods cooked over the firewood, the texture of my wool-braided clothes, comfortable, soft, and warm. but now it was unwoven and tarnished into what resembles a dirty cloak. I missed the feeling of being scared from the thunderstorms, the joy whenever I petted the sheep, the competitive anger whenever I lost the game with my brother, the sudden surprise whenever Grandpa come over to visit us. I missed the feeling whenever someone called out my name, about how I used to have a name that doesn't strike fear into people's hearts, a name that belongs to the first human who died, about how my real name is Abel,